嗨，大家好，
我叫 Jonas， 来自埃塞俄比亚。
我叫安南，来自孟加拉国。
我们是南昌航空大学的研究生。
We are the master students of Nanjing Hangzhou University.
Today we talk about the beautiful and the full of wisdom of Chinese language and culture.
So without further ado, let's dive into it.
As the language with the largest number of speakers, almost 1.6 billion people in the world, Chinese characters, embedded with the depths of the souls of its people, has crossed the river of thousands of years, carrying the first memories of Chinese life.
Endowed with unique cultural traditions, distinctive national thinking and expression, they have become a spiritual home shared by Chinese descendants. The wisdom of beauty of Chinese characters is embodied in the sound rhythm, profound classics, idioms with infinite meaning, poems that are eternally transmitted, ancient and modern masterpieces that are tirelessly read, and magical and timeless Chinese calligraphy. Chinese characters, as the only surviving ancient writing system in the world, are not only the gene for Chinese civilization to deliver from generations to generations, but also the cornerstone for world civilization.
Chinese characters summarize the smooth, round, straight, steep and thick lines from the colorful nature, taking the law of nature and express it,
which determines Chinese people's cosmological view of the unity of heaven and man and the nature of the Tao. Chinese characters are highly consistent with the form of philosophical discourse. Chinese have folded their cognition, thinking, and exploration of the external world, as well as their own wisdom and emotional experience and moral standards into Chinese characters. From the simple and thick oracle bones, Chinese bronze inscriptions, to the solid and dignified seal books such as Li Xu, which are integrated in the wisdom of generations of Chinese. The history of Chinese characters is a cultural history containing philosophical background.
As an ideographic system suitable for Chinese writing and compatible with the integration of form, sound, meaning, and theory, Chinese characters themselves are a cultural and philosophical symbol. From the perspective of the development of Chinese characters, the meaning of form makes people able to make sense of the meaning from its form.
During the Ottoman Spring period, the great philosopher Lao Tzu explained evolution of all things with the Tao, believing in Tao, which gives birth to one, one to two, two to three, and three to all things. So man follows earth, earth follows heaven, heaven follows Tao, and Tao follows nature. Tao could be both positive and negative sides, and it can be transformed by the opposites, as misfortune might be a blessing in disguise.
The most concise character, E, which means one, the ancients used a horizontal stroke to indicate that the chaotic and unopened ancient Taiji was divided into heaven and earth, and all things were derived, which is extremely majestic and poetic. One symbolizes the beginning of all things. R, which means two, the upper horizontal line represents the heaven. The bottom line represents the earth, and the heaven and the earth match as two. Sun, which means three, the ancients thought that the biggest in the world is the heaven, the earth, and people. So they used the three horizontal strokes to represent the three things. The upper is the heaven, the bottom is the earth, and the middle is the person who stands between the heaven and the earth. The word zhong represents the philosophical thought of Chinese. with the middle being the most central, and the khou, which means mouth, in the middle, like the boundary around the four sides, is upright. The straight vertical one means that it runs through the upper and lower, equally divided left and right, and is impartial.
The strokes and radicals of Chinese characters are the genetic code of Chinese philosophy. The dots, the horizontal and vertical lines, the left falling stroke, right falling stroke, turning stroke, hook stroke and raising stroke convey the texture of Chinese characters, showing the beauty of Chinese characters. The structure of Chinese character is like the essence of people with appearance and bones, thinking soul, emotional charm and rhythm. The forms and meanings between various parts are related and philosophical, and their external strokes are methodically distributed in the square characters grid. The internal structure has rule to follow as well, and there is a specific relationship between shape, sound, and meaning. Each stroke and part has a variety of flexible arrangements. For example, the spatial structure of Chinese characters can be disassembled and different spatial combinations have different meanings, thus forming various Chinese characters characterized by large numbers in complex form. By reading the mysteries of Chinese characters, you can understand Chinese outlook on life. For example, Lu, which means road, is under people's own feet, for as the saying goes, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. Shu means that the origin of happiness lies in the willingness to give to others. In this way, the way of thinking of the Chinese features empirical synthesis, tending to grasp the overall experience of things. They are good at grasping the two opposing aspects of things. This is what we call dialectical thinking.
The language structures of Chinese characters are highly consistent with the thinking structures of Chinese characters, and the order of language and the cognition are mutually exclusive. Chinese characters are dialect expressions of Chinese philosophy, and their image-based way of thinking on the Tao has allowed Chinese philosophy to use words full of figurative characteristics, such as heavenly path, truth, trade-off, end, existence or non-existence, clues, profit and loss, yin and yang, etc. for thousands of years. There are rules to follow in the structure of Chinese characters, and the original Chinese character oracle bone is a complete pictogram. A typical type of Chinese characters called ideograph is characterized by what one sees, hears, touches, smells, tastes, and thinks, giving them a profound philosophical connotation and reflecting the trajectory of our ancestors' understanding of things. The core of Confucius' thought is benevolence, which means love others. He put forward the arguments that do not do to others what you do not want, and the man of perfect virtue, wishing to be established himself, seeks also to establish others. Wishing to be enlarged himself, he seeks also to enlarge others. For example, the form of the word ren, which means man, different from that of animals, means walking upright and standing between heaven and earth, from which the people-oriented thinking of Chinese philosophy can be seen. The Book of Rites reads, "Man, the heart of heaven and earth." In addition, the associative characters are composed of two or more parts, each of which has a meaning, and the whole components constitute the cultural meaning of the Chinese character. The Shuo Wen Jiezi, which is the original Han Dynasty Chinese character dictionary with 10,516 entries, authored by Xu Shen in 2nd century, it says, benevolence is kinship between two people, which means that people love each other. That the benevolent person loves the people is the core of the people-oriented thought. The gentleman must have benevolence and benevolent virtue. The king is benevolent to the people, and the warrior is a benevolent person. Then comes with the pictophonetic character, also called phonosemantic character, with the largest number in Chinese characters. The semantic component of a phonosemantic character indicates a general category of the meaning, and the phonetic element of a Chinese pictophonetic character indicates the pronunciation of the character. For example, characters like mu means wood, huo means fire, tu means earth, jin means gold, shui means water, etc. indicate the attributes of things and then use the phonetic element to describe the relevant meanings. Adopting the way of one meaning with several characters to form a large number of Chinese characters, which can more accurately describe the subtleties of nature, society, and themselves. The overall thinking, pragmatic psychology, and dynamic equivalent cognition of the Chinese people determine the organic unity of philosophy and Chinese characters. Chinese characters, like philosophy, aim to explore the universal connection between things from the perspective of the universe and life. Chinese characters are the living fossils of Chinese culture, the carrier of Chinese philosophical history and culture, the crystallization of the wisdom of predecessors, and the product of the integration of primitive thinking and rational thinking. The interdependent structures of Chinese characters and the order of strokes make Chinese philosophy emphasize that contradictions are interdependent, antagonistic, and unified, and pay attention to the order of respect and inferiority.
静一思，唐，李白。床前明月光，疑是地上霜。举头望明月，低头思故乡。
China is the kingdom of poetry. As Confucius once said, it is by orders that the mind is aroused. It is by the rules of propriety that the character is established. It is from the music that the finished is received. Originated from by riverside are cooing, a pair of turtle doves. Classical Chinese poetry carries the spiritual pursuit, humanistic values and life force of the Chinese nation. Hidden in the book of poetry is the spirit and aesthetic paradigms of Chinese. In the late autumn, dew is heavy, the riverside is cold, and the book of poetry describes the thick grow the rush leaves. Their white dew turns to frost. When it comes to thinking of lovers, the book of poetry chanted, "Oh, you with the blue collar, prolonged is the anxiety of my heart." People in Nanchang are familiar with the poem that the autumn river shares a scenic hue with the vast sky. The evening glow parallels with a lonely duck to fly, which is a quiet and far-reaching picture with rich layers, containing colors, dynamics, fiction, reality, three-dimensional and artistic reverie. Chinese poems of profound significance with rhythms can be found everywhere. Cheng Jiang's vigor and desolation can be felt in his poem. Before me, unseen are the ancients. Behind me, unseen those to come. Thinking of this infinite universe, alone I shed my tears. Liu Bai's style is imbued with a spirit that conquers mountains and rivers. Do you not see the yellow river come from the sky, rushing into the sea and near come back? Do you not see the mirror bright in the chamber high? Grief o'er your snow-white hair that once was silken back. When hopes are won, oh, drink your fill in high delight, and never leave your wine cup empty in moonlight. Heaven has made us talents, we are not made in vain. 1,000 gold coins spent, more will turn up again. When Wang Changling went out of the frontier path, he wrote a forceful poem featuring power and energy. The moon and the world has not changed from dynasty to dynasty, but nobody had returned from the crusade. As long as the general defends the stronghold, invaders will never occupy our territory. Wang Zhizhuang's majestic height is demonstrated from the tumultuous yellow river is rushing from the white clouds. A lonely city stands alone among the steep mountains. Why should he complain about spring breeze by floating willow song? The spring wind will not come yeoman's pass. Viewed from the poem, the beauty of mountains and rivers and the love of the world are forced into the most beautiful and elegant state of natural life. It was a picture that made people's imaginations roam freely. Liu Bai's farewell was romantic. My friend has left the west where the yellow crane towers, for rivers town green with willows and red with flowers. His blessing sail is lost in the boundless sky, where I see but the endless river rolling by. The greatness of the poetry in Tang Dynasty comes from the poet's accurate understanding and perceptions of the state of life, and the purity of the poet's soul that reflects the world's warmth and coldness. In the poetry of Song Dynasty, there is a hidden appearance of the elegance of Chinese 1,000 years ago, such as the moment of parting, the patriotic emotion, and love between man and women. Yan Xu faintly lamented that flowers fall off, do what they may. Swallows return, no strangers they. Ouyuan Xu's life confession is that human beings are born with sentimental of farewell, which has nothing to do with the wind and moon. Classical poetry not only embodies the unique concept of Chinese culture, ambition, temperament, charm, which is broad and profound, showing the colorful life of ancient literature, but also contains all the symbols of the Chinese national spirit.
During the pandemic, the most users of Chinese people have encouraged and united Chinese people to fight against the virus.
China continues striving to achieve dynamic zero COVID in the short term, as it is still the most economical and the most effective prevention strategy against COVID-19. Though separated by a mountain, we will share the same clouds and rain. The bright moon belongs not to a single town. Virtue is not left to stand alone. He who practices it will have neighbors. While mountains and rivers separate us, we enjoy the same moonlight under the same sky. Fear not the want of armor, for mine is also yours to wear. These Chinese characters, full of humanistic care for people, have become the common discourse for Chinese, Japanese, Korean, and Italian in mutual encouragement and friendly assistance. The philosophical wisdom contained in Chinese characters will surely receive more attention from all over the world.